Hello everyone. I'm sharing this because I honestly don't know what to do, and I'd really appreciate your advice in the comments. My name's Daniel, 34, and for 7 years I thought my marriage to Mara, 32, was safe. Sunday brunches with pancakes and strong coffee, our little jokes about who made the worst playlists, all of it felt like an anchor in a drifting world. But over the last year something shifted. Mara grew impatient, sharp-tongued, like I was always in her way. She started going out more, errands, work drinks, late yoga. She'd come back smelling of wine and something expensive, brushing off my questions with, "Daniel, don't be so dramatic." Then came the smartwatch I bought her for her birthday. She wore it constantly, smiling at messages she never shared, swiping them away before I could see. Last Sunday morning, while she was in the shower, the watch buzzed on the counter. I wasn't snooping, I just glanced. One short line glowed on the screen, and in that instant the ground under my marriage began to crack. I still remember how quiet the house was when it happened, steam from the shower curling out of the bathroom door, rain ticking against the kitchen window. The watch vibrated once more, its glow spilling across the counter. I glanced down. 3 words blinked up at me, followed by a heart emoji. "Miss you already." The sender's name wasn't saved, just a number, but the preview of an earlier message sat underneath. "Last night was perfect." "Same place next week?" My stomach dropped so fast it felt like gravity had turned cruel. I stood frozen, fingers hovering above the watch as if touching it would burn me. Everything blurred, the hum of the fridge, the shower running down the hall. I forced myself to breathe and scrolled up just enough to see a string of texts, each worse than the one before, little snapshots of a life I didn't know my wife was living. Compliments about her laugh, jokes about keeping it quiet, plans to meet at a hotel downtown. For a moment I actually hoped it was a prank, some kind of marketing spam. But the language was too intimate, too specific. I stepped back, heart racing so hard I could hear it in my ears. I set the watch exactly where it had been and retreated to the hallway just as Mara turned off the water. My reflection in the darkened window looked pale, almost unfamiliar. By the time she came out wrapped in a towel, humming softly, I had already made a silent promise to myself: I wasn't going to look away from this, no matter how much it hurt. When Mara stepped out of the bathroom, towel knotted above her chest, she looked relaxed, like someone who didn't have a care in the world. My pulse was thudding so hard I thought she might hear it. "Can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She glanced at me, one eyebrow lifting. "What now, Daniel?" I literally just got out of the shower. I gestured toward the kitchen. "It's important." She sighed, exaggerated, as if I'd asked her to haul furniture instead of sit down for a conversation. She dropped into a chair, twisting the towel tighter around her body. "I saw a message on your watch," I began. "It popped up while you were in the shower." Her eyes narrowed instantly, and her tone turned sharp. "So you're snooping through my stuff now? God, you really don't trust me, do you?" I wasn't snooping. It lit up right in front of me. "Miss you already," a heart, and something about last night being perfect. "Care to explain?" For a beat she looked caught, then her face shifted into practiced annoyance. "Oh, that? It's just a client from work being flirty. I didn't want to start drama over nothing. Clients don't book hotel rooms," I said quietly. Mara rolled her eyes. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We had drinks after a gallery opening, that's all. Stop inventing stories in your head." But I could see the way her fingers gripped the edge of the chair, the quick flick of her tongue against her lips. Every detail of her body language screamed guilt even as her voice dripped with disdain. "I want the truth," I said, steady but firm. "No deflections, no blaming me." She scoffed, pushed back from the table, and grabbed her phone from the counter. "Fine. Believe whatever conspiracy you've cooked up. I'm not doing this while you're acting like some jealous cop." And just like that, she disappeared into the bedroom, leaving the door half closed, a line drawn in the dust between us. After she slammed the bedroom door, I stayed at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the grain in the wood. My hands were still trembling from the argument, and the messages I'd read kept replaying behind my eyes like a film I couldn't switch off. There was a hollow feeling in my chest, part rage, part grief, part disbelief. I kept thinking about how easily she'd lied, how fast she'd switched from guilt to annoyance, as if I were the problem for daring to ask. Sleep was impossible that night. I paced the living room, replaying every scene from the past year, the late yoga, the perfume, the way she laughed at her watch instead of at me. All the small pieces I'd brushed off suddenly snapped together into something I couldn't ignore. The next morning, Mara behaved as though nothing had happened. She brewed coffee, scrolling through her phone, humming lightly. When I tried to talk, she cut me off with, "Daniel, don't start again. I don't have time for your paranoia." Her calmness made me feel even more unmoored, like I was standing on a rug she'd yanked away. I spent the day at work barely able to focus. My lunch sat untouched while I stared out the window, wondering if my marriage had always been a facade, if I'd been loving a version of her that only existed when she felt like putting it on. By evening, the sadness turned into a hard, clear line inside me. I couldn't keep living in a house where the truth was optional. Something had to change, even if it broke me. By the fifth morning after those messages, I was running on little more than caffeine and adrenaline. I'd been living in a fog, waiting for Mara to suddenly wake up and hand me the truth, but it was becoming obvious, she wasn't going to volunteer anything. I sat alone at the kitchen table with a legal pad, trying to wrestle my spinning thoughts into something solid. 3 columns: what I know, what I suspect, what I need. Under the last heading, the words came easily: honesty, respect, a partner who treats me like more than an obstacle. For the first time since that morning, I felt a sliver of clarity. That evening I told Mara we had to talk, no sarcasm, no distractions. She rolled her eyes but followed me into the living room, still scrolling through her phone. "I can't keep living like this," I said. "I know there's someone else. I've seen enough to be sure. I'm not accusing, I'm asking, do you actually want this marriage, or are you already gone?" She looked startled, then defensive. "You're being dramatic again, Daniel. Why do you always twist things into some grand betrayal?" I stayed calm. "Because I'm tired of feeling like a fool. If you want him, say so. If you want us, then stop lying and prove it." For a moment she just stared, fingers tightening around her phone. Then she muttered, "You're overreacting. It's nothing serious." But I wasn't fooled by the casual tone, there was fear behind her eyes. I told her I'd be sleeping in the guest room until she decided what she wanted. I wasn't threatening, I was protecting what was left of myself. She scoffed but didn't follow when I walked down the hall. Lying on that spare bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized I'd taken my first real step. I'd stopped letting her rewrite reality. Whatever came next, reconciliation or goodbye, would be on honest ground, or not at all. The night after I told Mara I'd be sleeping in the guest room, I lay awake staring at the faint glow of the street lamp across the blinds. My thoughts were running circles, but underneath the noise there was a quiet thread of clarity. I couldn't undo what I'd seen, and I couldn't keep living in a limbo built out of her half-truths. The next morning, I got up before dawn, brewed coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I searched for therapists in our area who specialized in infidelity and trust recovery. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting, if booking a professional meant I was making it too serious. But another, steadier part reminded me that this was serious. My life was sitting at a crossroads, and ignoring it would only hand Mara the power to keep rewriting the story. I made 2 calls, one to a counselor for myself, another to set up an initial couples session. Even just leaving voicemails felt like planting a flag in solid ground after weeks of drifting. That evening, Mara returned from a quick errand, phone clutched like a lifeline. She paused when she saw me waiting in the living room. "We need to talk again," I said. Her expression shifted annoyance, then a quick flicker of nerves. "Daniel, I can't do another interrogation tonight." "It's not an interrogation," I replied, steady but firm. "I've made appointments for therapy. One for me, one for us. If you want this marriage, I need you to come with me." She laughed, short and brittle. "Therapy? Over a few texts? You're unbelievable." I stayed silent, letting the weight of her words settle between us. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't rush to smooth over her resistance. Finally she sighed, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. Fine. I'll go once, but I'm not promising anything. Once is a start, I said, though part of me doubted she meant it. Later, in the quiet of the guest room, I opened a notebook and began writing everything I'd learned since the smartwatch buzzed. Seeing it on paper helped me breathe, the messages, her deflections, the way my own boundaries had begun to solidify. I wasn't out of the storm, but I had finally stopped pretending there wasn't one. That weekend I also reached out to an old friend I'd drifted from, someone I trusted to listen without judgment. Over coffee, I told him what was happening. Saying the words aloud stripped away some of their power. The situation stopped being an amorphous dread and became something I could name, analyze, and eventually leave behind if I needed to. Mara, meanwhile, was cautious. She cooked dinner, made small talk, even suggested watching a movie together. But there was a brittleness beneath every gesture, like she was trying to keep a fragile mask from cracking. I recognized it now, the same mask she'd worn when she lied about late yoga classes or clients sending her hearts. I realized that whatever choice lay ahead, I would walk into it standing upright, not bowed under secrets or self-doubt. My first steps were small, therapy appointments, a journal, a quiet refusal to let her gaslight me, but they were mine. For the first time since the message flashed on that watch, I felt the faint outline of a path, not easy, not painless, but clear enough to start putting one foot in front of the other. Therapy was scheduled for Wednesday evening, but by Monday, new cracks were already spreading through the facade Mara was trying to maintain. That morning I woke before her and brewed coffee, letting the quiet of the house calm me. I almost felt steady until I noticed her smartwatch lying on the counter again, face down. I didn't touch it, but I caught a glimpse of the reflection in the stainless steel kettle, a faint notification lighting up the band. My stomach clenched. When Mara came into the kitchen, she swiped the watch in one quick motion and slid it onto her wrist, too fast to be casual. She kissed my cheek and said, "Don't wait up for me tonight, there's a late brainstorm with clients." The words were polished, but her eyes flickered away. I decided not to confront her immediately. Instead, I spent the day gathering quiet evidence, checking credit card statements, scrolling through our shared calendar, cross-referencing times she claimed to be at yoga with the gym's class schedule. Holes appeared everywhere, phantom meetings, errands that stretched for hours. That evening, I drove past the studio she'd named as her after-work spot. Through the drizzle on my windshield, I saw no lights, no cars. My pulse quickened as I followed a hunch and headed toward the gallery district. Halfway down a narrow street, I spotted her car parked outside a small wine bar. Through the window, I saw her leaning close to a man with dark hair, laughing at something on his phone. I didn't barge in. I just sat there, rain streaking down the glass, absorbing the image until it branded itself into memory. Then I drove home, hands gripping the wheel so tight they ached. When Mara arrived later, she smelled faintly of wine and paint thinner. "Long meeting," she said breezily, hanging her coat. I met her eyes, searching for even a flicker of shame. There was none, only irritation at being studied. I told her, calm but firm, that I knew she hadn't been where she claimed. She bristled, launching into a monologue about how suffocating I was, how normal couples don't stalk each other. I didn't rise to the bait. I only said, if you want to stay married, you'll stop lying. Starting now. For the first time, her facade slipped. She didn't confess, not exactly, but her shoulders sagged. "Fine," she muttered. "I had a drink with someone from the gallery. It's not a big deal." Her words were small, but her voice was too quick, too rehearsed. I recognized the tactic, give a crumb of truth to distract from the feast of secrets still hidden. That night, lying alone in the guest room, I felt something shift inside me. The man staring at the ceiling wasn't the same one who'd once believed in Sunday brunch as an anchor. He was tired of crumbs. Tired of stories that changed with the wind. And for the first time, I started picturing a life that didn't require me to police someone else's lies, a life where I could breathe without second-guessing every word. By Tuesday, I knew I couldn't keep circling the same arguments with Mara. She'd mastered the art of scattering crumbs of truth just far enough apart to keep me doubting myself. If I wanted clarity, I needed to make the rules clear, not for her benefit, but for my sanity. That evening I asked her to sit down in the living room. She sauntered in, glass of wine in hand, phone still glowing with some unseen conversation. Mara, I began, forcing my voice steady, this marriage doesn't survive if I'm always trying to guess which version of you I'm getting. I need transparency, no more secret meetups, no private messages you hide from me. If you're serious about us, you'll come to therapy tomorrow, and you'll cut contact with whoever you've been seeing. She raised a brow, smirking. So now you're writing contracts? That's romantic. This isn't a contract, I said quietly. It's the line between a marriage and a lie. For a moment her facade cracked, not guilt exactly, but something wary. She set her wineglass down with a little too much force. You're acting like a dictator, Daniel. I'm allowed to talk to people. You're blowing this up because you can't stand not being the center of my universe. Her words stung, but I didn't back away. You don't owe me constant attention, I replied. You owe honesty. That's the bare minimum. She laughed again, but the sound was thin. Fine, she said, pulling her phone out. Here, I'll text him right now and tell him it's over, will that make you feel better? She typed quickly, then flashed the screen, can't see you anymore. Need space. Husband's jealous. It felt like a performance, not closure, but at least it put the shadow into words. I told her I'd believe it when I saw consistency, no more sudden errands, no midnight messages. Her eyes narrowed, and for a heartbeat I thought she might throw the phone. Instead she sank back into the sofa, swirling the last of her wine. You really think you can control everything, don't you? She murmured. Maybe you're the reason I needed an escape. That line hit hard, but I stayed rooted. Maybe, I said. But escape doesn't mean betrayal. If you want freedom, we can separate. What I won't do is live with half-truths. I left her there and retreated to the guest room, shutting the door behind me. My hands were still trembling, but not with fear, with resolve. Lying in the dark, I realized something, whether Mara stepped toward honesty or not, I was no longer stuck waiting for permission to have peace. The next chapter of my life, whatever it held, would be written on clear ground or not at all. Wednesday arrived with a gray sky and a low, heavy wind. I left work early so I wouldn't be late for the therapy appointment. Mara, however, hadn't even confirmed she'd come. I sat in the car outside the counselor's office for 15 minutes, watching couples step inside together, hoping each time the door opened that I'd see her. She never appeared. When I got home, her car was already in the driveway. Inside, the smell of wine and expensive perfume hit me before I saw her curled on the sofa, scrolling her phone. You missed the session, I said quietly. She barely looked up. Yeah, sorry. Got tied up at the gallery. Maybe next time. Something inside me snapped, not loud or violent, but final, like a lock sliding into place. There won't be a next time if you keep treating this like an optional chore, I told her. She rolled her eyes. God, you're exhausting. Can't you just let it go? Nothing's happening. I sat down across from her, steady. I saw you Monday. Wine bar, Narrow Street, with him. Her fingers tightened around the phone. For a heartbeat she froze, then tried a laugh that didn't sound like her. You followed me? That's creepy, Daniel. I drove by the studio you claimed you were at, I said, voice calm even as my heart pounded. It was dark. And there you were, with Julian. Her eyes flicked away. So what if I had a drink? It doesn't mean I'm cheating. The words rang hollow in the room. I felt an ache rise in my throat, but underneath it was a solid clarity. I was done living in a maze of excuses. I need you to understand something, I said, leaning forward. I love the woman I married, but I don't know if she's still here. I won't share a home with someone who treats loyalty like a suggestion. For once she didn't have a comeback. She stared at the floor, jaw tight, like she wanted to speak but couldn't find a safe route through the silence. I stood, suddenly tired of holding up a conversation she wasn't brave enough to have. I'll give you time to decide who you want to be, I said. But until then, I'm done chasing shadows. That night I locked the guest room door, not out of anger but to stake a boundary I could finally see. For the first time, the weight pressing against my chest lifted just enough for me to sleep. Outside, the wind rattled the branches against the window, but inside there was a strange, quiet steadiness, the calm that comes when you stop letting someone else decide what's real. Writing all this down was my salvation, and I owe you the ending. After that night in the guest room, I woke up with a clear and firm understanding of what I needed. For months, I had been dancing around Mara's moods, waiting for her to give me permission to believe what I already knew. But the truth was simple: my marriage was a story written in disappearing ink, and I was tired of trying to read between the lines. I sat Mara down at the kitchen table, the same place where I had first talked to her about smartwatches. Sunlight flooded the wood, reflecting off the rim of her wineglass, left over from the night before. She looked tired, wary, almost submissive. "I can't go on like this," I said. "I offered therapy, honesty, a chance to start over. And you chose secrets." For a moment, she looked like she was going to resist, but then her shoulders slumped. "I don't know why I couldn't stop," she whispered. "I liked the attention. I didn't think you would really leave." I felt a pang of sadness, but also relief. "I'm not leaving to punish you," I said gently. "I'm choosing a life where I don't have to beg for the truth." I told her I was filing for divorce. We discussed the logistics, the rent, the furniture, our joint bank account. She agreed, now subdued, as if realizing that the story she had been spinning no longer held me captive. The next morning, I packed a bag for the weekend, clothes, a journal, a toothbrush, and went to stay with a friend. Stepping out into the cool air, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: room to breathe. I won't pretend that I'm healed. Betrayal leaves scars that aren't visible. But I realized that clarity is worth the pain you have to go through to find it. You can't build love on guesswork and half-truths. And if someone shows you that they prefer to hide rather than stand by your side, the bravest thing you can do is to free yourself. With that, I conclude this chapter. I am moving forward, slower, wiser, but lighter. Thank you for reading and for every word of support. If my story helps even one person trust their instincts, then it is worth sharing. Take care of your hearts, cherish your peace, and never let anyone convince you that honesty is too much. Goodbye, and please leave a comment or like if these words have given you strength.